Welcome to Decoding Learning Models, a series by L&D Today, the show where we decode the future of corporate learning and development, one insight at a time. I'm your host, Roshan Jha, and today we're diving into a model that shaped how we think about adult learning for decades, but is often misunderstood or misapplied in corporate contexts, the Felder-Silverman Learning Styles Model. To help us unpack this powerful framework, I'm joined by Gabriel Banerjee, an expert in learning design and cognitive psychology, who's worked extensively with L&D teams to translate academic theory into real-world impact. Today, we'll explore how this model originated, what makes it distinct, and how you can apply it to boost learning engagement, retention, and outcomes in your own organization. Thank you, Gabriel, for joining us today in the studio. So like we spoke, we are decoding a lot of learning models with you, and I'm glad that you could spare time for this series with us. So before we transition, into deep diving into the model, give us a brief of who you are, what do you do?
I really like to start with the way you started it, like the models, the usage and the misusage. So we'll definitely have a decoding aspect of all those formats.
Right.
To give you a brief, just completed 25 plus into the learning and organization development fraternity.
Wow.
Been proud of whatever I've done from the models which our ancestors have built with us.
Right.
The biggest thing that I've achieved with all these things are, to understand the learning psychology of what they wanted to create.
Right.
And what they wanted to say or the applications, or how can you use that as a cognizance of what we're doing right now.
Right.
Because post-COVID, things have changed drastically into the corporate space.
True.
People have moved from training as a program to training as a process. They're looking much more into a deep dive of how do you implement ROIs.
Right.
My journey of this 25 plus years have been astounding, morely focused on people development and their growth perspective.
Right.
Tuned to it, it's more applicable of what you do, what you do not do. That's
Right.
what the focus is all about. Apart from that, has been a bit fun of reading books, theories, going there. AI being now in the forefront, so
True.
learning that. Apart from that, I have always said in my other podcasts and challenges, the biggest challenge is how can you implement the learning psychology, the strategy, and then embark into a people development growth. So with that
Right.
note, thank you for having me here. It's
Absolutely.
a privilege,
Thank
and
you.
let's deep dive.
So, talking about the Silverman-Felder model, right? Let's start by going back to the roots. So, who were Felder and Silverman, and what was the challenge that they were trying to solve with the model that they built?
Before I go to that model, I want to do a little bit back dive for the viewers so that they know where we are coming from.
Right.
In the 1833, for the first time, what we call adult learning, which is a term called andragogy,
Right.
because pedagogy is child learning,
Right.
it was first coined by a German educator by the name of Alexander Knapp.
Wow. And this
That's
is when?
1833.
1833.
Nobody knew what was adult learning prior to that. There were psychologists, there were a lot of people, but people never knew what was adult learning was all about.
True.
67 years later, Edward Lindemann took it forward, but there was no framework. It's still a theory.
Right.
Worked on the adult learning process. And again, another 60 years till the time Malcolm Knowles came up with the adult learning concept of
Right.
which after again 20 years down the line, Felderman and Silverman came up with the model.
Right.
Now, the reason of connecting the dots is all these people spoke about one thing in common, whether it was 1833, 1960s or 1980s.
Right.
What is the learner experience? Let us dive. Now, Felder and Silverman, these two gentlemen and the lady, Silverman passed away in 15th of Jan 2024 at the age of
very
92,
recent.
very recently. So the surprising or the efficacy of this model is Felder was a chemical engineering professor in a North Carolina State University.
Wow.
He's not from a behavioral psychology, so he's
Right.
typically from an engineering background. And in the 1960s and 70s, as you know, US was going through the STEM process, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, how they can cope up with all the mechanisms. he came up with the thought process that why aren't the students coming more to the lectures? Is it one-sided or there's something? So he had a discussion with Felder-Silverman, and they came up with the model which you said, the Felder-Silverman Learning Style Models.
Right.
Now, what they thought about was the learner experience. They didn't say that this is a topic and then you deliver this. No.
Right.
What will they experience? How will they experience? And based on that, as a professional, you create something to deliver. So it's not like you have a course. So for example, if you go typically in engineering,
Right.
you might have some models. So what typically do, I'm not saying no lecturer is bad, but
Right.
typically what they do, this is the model, this is what you apply. They
Right.
reversed it. And that's why that model, being one of the pioneer in the educational institutes around the world, new ways of teaching engineering students, if you see the practical applications are coming up. So that's the genesis and the base of the Felder-Silverman model.
Interesting. And more than 100 years to that model,
Yeah.
right? And the evolution aspect of it
Yeah.
with so many changes. Coming back to the question, the problem was, like you mentioned, they were trying to work on the learner experience. So do you think they were able to stem something down or put something down towards that, use this methodology in this way?
I will give you an example from today's perspective, and then I'll tell you the problem. Right. So today what happens is, typically when you're working for an organization or being a consultant, or if you're a trainer,
right.
You're given a statement that I want to do X program or Y program. Now, typically what happens is, if you have that thing in you, because if you're experienced, you have done somewhere in a company or as a consultant, so typically pick up that and
Right.
then try to evaluate with what is the current situation and do it.
Correct.
What they are saying is, they are saying no. I mean, it's not that it's wrong, but what they are saying is, think about, now if you are a student, how will you process that information? How will you understand that information?
Right.
What are the inputs that I can use so that your processing and your understanding happens in a better way? How do you perceive information?
Right.
So so he never said it was a problem, because the engineering model across the world still remains the same. You go to an engineering college, you have to complete X amount of lectures, and then from there you get into that kind of a zone. But
Right.
think from a corporate perspective, and you've been in this industry for quite a long time. Today, if I am told that, Gabriel, I want to develop something on leadership,
Right.
how would you do? There are n number of models.
True.
I can select situational leadership 1, I can go for Blanchard model, there is a transformational model, then there is a performance curve by Timothy Galway.
Right.
Which one will I choose? They say, no, don't choose that. You go with that notion, what the learner wants. And then I typically keep in mind at a short form, not saying that they invented it, but for a professional, because there are so many theories and models. I call it PIPU.
Okay.
How does a learner process an information? It can be a model, it can be an abstract, it can be a learning experience. That is first.
What does PIPU stand for?
Very good. So P is processing, I is input, P is perceiving, and U is understanding.
Okay.
Okay. Although there is no chronological order, but I use that order to
For your
benefit
project
to know the mind, because it's a huge model. I mean, it cannot stick to one way. They say it is PPIU, the model that was created. So how you process, how you perceive, how the input is given, and how you understand it.
Right.
Because understanding is a last. But I typically keep in mind in that way so that I am able to recall it in the right. Coming back to your question. So let's say you have read a podcast. So how will you process the information? Not everything would be your requirement or need.
Correct.
How will you perceive that information? What are the inputs? So if this is a podcast, then we are using a visual and auditory, right? The VARK model.
Right.
Plus, after the first 3 steps, how do I understand? Because there is a cognition happening in yourself.
Right.
So how do I do? That is the base and the genesis of that model.
Interesting.
And then they have gone into bifurcating the processing into active, reflective, then perceiving into sensing and intuitive, then input into visual and verbal, and then going into understanding into sequential and global. And we'll deep dive, but that's the base.
Of course. So from a L&D professional's perspective, why should today these L&D professionals pay attention to a model that originated in academia decades ago, what makes it still relevant in the corporate training context?
Try to look that model as a lens, not as a theoretical model which you can pick up and build something.
Apply, right.
Let me give you an example. In one of the organizations I've worked, I used that model, not to a full extensive, but on a smaller level.
Okay.
I was supposed to train 1,500 employees on leadership.
Wow.
Okay, now 1,500 employees in leadership, it's a huge time,
Absolutely.
money, plus people would come for a program. Now, if you look at the first part, which is the processing. Processing is divided into two parts, active, reactive.
Right.
So reactive learners will do something by doing.
Right.
Reflective learners will want to have a theory or a thinking game or something.
Right.
So I created a simulation which will give them both of these things.
Interesting. So you're catering to both kinds of learners.
Both kinds of learners. Now, the choice is either you can run an assessment of index of learning styles, or you can use a VAK to know what are the learners. But what if you don't have that time to do that assessment?
Mm-hmm.
So you keep the small buckets. So that is bucket one.
Right.
Bucket two is I directly went into I didn't go to perceive. So what are the inputs I did? I said for the initial first part of the program, which is phase one, we will use the learning management system to assign mobile learning courses.
Okay.
So what is mobile learning courses? It's input.
Right.
It's visual.
Right.
So we only used visual, and we took a feedback that whether only visual will do, or do we need to do a voiceover.
Right.
So we got a feedback that voiceover will work better. So with it, and that is why that model is still relevant today.
Right.
I can pick one, use it in one type of sequences. I can use it in second type of sequences. In this case, I have not used perceiving or understanding.
Right. Right.
That's the creation. Now, when you go to the pilot batch, now Felder and Silverman always says this: don't scale it in the first time. Dwell, understand, execute with one or two cohorts, and take a feedback loop, not a single feedback.
Right. Right.
And continue their journey for at least 3 to 4 or 6 months. What will happen is you will now come to know the impact of that model. True. Because eventually, today, even in corporate training also, even post-COVID also, there is digital training,
right,
and there is face-to-face learning.
True.
If I have to use both, visual, verbal, it
Right.
comes automatically. It now becomes a channel. It becomes a medium. You don't have to do anything else. And then you run a pre and post, which is your understanding.
True.
So I use the model not in sequence, but in variable parts.
Right.
And it gives
So there's no rule that says that, this
No.
is the sequence. You follow what suits you.
What suits
Interesting.
you.
So that's a great combination of the Felder-Silverman model and plus the PIPU model that you mentioned.
Yeah.
So that comes into
So
place.
PIPU is the same model, but what Felder and Silverman says, it is PPIU.
But you have your own integration.
I have changed it because what happens in today's organization is they don't want to wait for the impact to happen.
Right.
And post-COVID, that has triggered more effective. So before you go for a meeting, or if you're an L&D manager or you're an L&D trainer in an organization, the first thing they will ask, what will I get out of it?
Right.
So then I tweaked it. So I said understanding is the last. Right. Let me work on the input and the processing part first. How will I reach 1,500 employees? I mean, it's post-COVID. Not every company will go and do a 2-day program, right?
True.
What we typically knew pre-COVID.
Right.
So I said, okay, we have LMS. We'll create mobile learning courses. And mobile learning courses are your instant success. Once they finish, you'll get a trigger in the LMS that, let's say Gabriel have finished course A, B, and C.
Right.
Now I'm ready to go with the understanding. So here I did not use the perceiving, input being a constant because it's verbal and visual in both the ways.
Right.
That way.
Interesting.